Chapter 2, It Ain't. Unfortunately for George and Harold, their adventure had only just begun. As everyone walked back to school, a confusing argument got underway. "I want my hamster back," said Mr. Krupp. "Your hamster," said George. "First of all, he's our hamster now. And second of all, he never belonged to you. He belonged to Melvin." "I don't care who he belongs to," Melvin interrupted. "Hamsters aren't allowed in school, especially not in my school. I'm giving you all three of your bobs of detention for bringing that furry beast into your classroom." "You can't give us a detention," said Harold. "You're just a kid like us." Suddenly, Mr. and Mrs. Sneedly came running toward them. "Melvin, you all right?" cried Mrs. Sneedly. "We're so happy you're safe, son," cried Mrs. Sneedly. "Mommy! Papa!" cried Mr. Krupp. He dashed over to Melvin's parents with open arms. The sight of a bald, grown man in his underwear running toward them made Mrs. Sneedly scream in horror. "Hey, what's the big idea?" yelled Mrs. Sneedly. "It's me, Papa!" cried Mr. Krupp. "Don't you recognize your own son?" "Get away from us. You! Mrs. Sneedly yelled as she hid Mr. Krupp with her purse. Melvin ignored the commotion as he walked past them all and went into the school. Melvin stormed upstairs and headed for the school office. Everyone except Miss Anthrope had already gone home for the day, and she was getting ready to leave too. "Just where do you think you're going?" shouted Melvin. Miss Anthrope turned and stared in shock at the fourth grader standing behind her. "What did you just say?" she cried in a voice that was rapidly becoming a scream. "Who do you think you are?" "I'm the guy who's gonna fire your hiney if you don't get me my coffee. Now!" yelled Melvin. Normally, school secretaries don't have the authority to hang a child from a coat hook by his underwear, but today had been a particularly stressful day for Miss Anthrope. She had been covered in snot, carried through town by a rampaging robotic monster, and worst of all, forced to chaperone an elementary school field trip. Now it was payback time. Chapter 3, Mr. Melvin and Kruppy the Kid. Miss Anthrope collected her things and left for home, grumbling under her breath as she passed George and Harold in the hallway. The two boys could hear Melvin's angry shouts coming from down the hall, so they went to the office to investigate. While they were getting Melvin off the hook, Mr. Krupp ran into the office, sweaty and out of breath. "You guys have got to help me," he cried. "My mom and dad are trying to kill me. Has the world gone mad?" "Relax, Einstein," said George calmly, "and put on some clothes." George and Harold had already figured out what was going on, so they tried to explain the situation to Melvin and Mr. Krupp. "You see," said Harold, "after you guys got morphed together by the Combinatron 2000, we switched the batteries around and separated you. But for some strange reason, it switched your brains around. Now Mr. Krupp's brain is inside Melvin's body, and Melvin's brain is inside Mr. Krupp's body." "That's a bunch of BUNK!" yelled Melvin. "Take a look and see for yourselves," said George. He pulled a full-length mirror in front of Mr. Krupp and Melvin. They looked at themselves in astonishment. I'm a kid again," said the guy who looked like Melvin but had Mr. Krupp's brain. "And I'm old and fat and bald and ugly," cried the guy who looked like Mr. Krupp that had Melvin's brain. "And I've bad breath and creepy nose hairs and—" "Aye!" yelled the guy who looked like Melvin but had Mr. Krupp's brain. At this point, you might be saying to yourself, "Dang, this book is getting confusing." Now don't worry, this will all get cleared up by the end of chapter 17. But for now, let's rename the two characters who have the right brains and the wrong body, shall we? Let's call the guy who looks like Mr. Krupp but has Melvin Sneedly's brain, Mr. Melvin. And we'll call the kid who looks like Melvin Sneedly but has Mr. Krupp's brain, Kruppy the Kid. Please refer to the extra chart below in case you get mixed up. Melvin's brain, Mr. Melvin. Mr. Krupp's brain, Kruppy the Kid. Chapter 4, Things Get Worse. Kruppy the Kid climbed up into his chair and demanded to know what was going to be done about this mix-up? I could solve this problem right away if I still had my Combinatron 2000, said Mr. Melvin sheepishly, but it got smashed in the last book. Well, start building a new one, bub, shouted Kruppy the Kid. Okay, whined Mr. Melvin, but it'll take about 6 months. 6 months? Screamed Kruppy the Kid. I can't go around looking like a kid for 6 months. I've got a school to run, Buster. Sorry, Mr. Melvin whimpered, but building a cellular combiner is extremely difficult. It takes time. It's not easy like building a robot or a time machine or a photoatomic transumgabulating ectophantrupotonic ziptomizer. Hey, wait a second, said George. Did you just say that building a time machine was easy? Yeah, said Mr. Melvin. It just takes a day or two. Why? Well, why don't you just build a time machine? Asked George. Then you can go back in time to before the Combinatron 2000 got smashed, grab it, and bring it back to the present time. Mr. Melvin sat up for a moment, and then his eyes lit up. I've got it, he said, snapping his fingers. I'll build a time machine, then go back in time to before the Combinatron 2000 got smashed, grab it, and bring it back to the... Hey, what the heck is he doing? Snap. Everyone turned and looked at Kruppy the Kid, who had just stripped down to his underwear and was now tying a red curtain around his neck. Oh no! Screamed George. Get some water! Get some water! Harold ran out to the drinking fountain, but he was too late. Kruppy the Kid shouted a triumphant "Tra-la-la!" then turned and flew out the window.